What is up, everybody? Bob here from Prospect Analytics. Now, a few weeks ago, I did a video on my 10 favorite Bowman hitters to buy who have a first base chrome autograph under $10. And everybody seemed to appreciate that video. So now I've made a pitcher's version, which was an article that I posted on my site at www.prospect-analytics.com last week. Now, if you want the earliest access to these articles, along with my prospect rankings that are made for the hobby, our daily email blast, our weekly hot sheets, all that good stuff, you can go over to the site and sign up. And for those of you who will be at the National, I am actually leaving tomorrow morning and we'll be at the show all day Friday. So go ahead, drop some information in the comments. If you have a booth or a table, please let me know. If you will have some Bowman in stock, I'm bringing a bunch of fun stuff to trade. I'd like to meet up with people and talk prospects. But for today, we're going to look at pitchers. Now, pitchers are different from hitters. There are a couple different ways that hitters can get kind of hyped in Bowman. Pitchers, there are two specific ways that I am looking to buy pitchers. One is that they haven't broken out yet. That's obviously the biggest one. That's usually how it works with hitters. You get these guys who have really high upside, but maybe they're teenagers, they just made their professional debut. We haven't really seen everything come together yet, and they're not really on any top 100 list. That's a good place to see a breakout. But another spot I like to target with pitchers is guys who are very cheap that are very close to making it to Major League Baseball. Now, when it comes to hitters, everyone says, sell the call up, but there are actually situations where you should hold. There is data to back up that the cheaper players, under $20 autographs, they have a tendency to go up more when a player is called up to make their debut than players who are, $50, $100, because they're already more household names. They're already more expected to be called up. And on top of that, the numbers actually show that players who are cheap have a better chance of continuing to go up in price after they debut. Obviously, with your big names, they are hyped from day one. They get called up, that hype's kind of already baked in. And then even if they play well, the people kind of lose interest in the market and their prices go down. Whereas if you're kind of a nobody, you come up, that's news, that can make your price jump up. And then if you play well in the MLB, but had a, $5, $6 base autograph when you get called up, those things will spike pretty quickly. Obviously, if you buy some deeper color, you can get some gold. Some of these guys are extremely cheap. And, when they get called up, if they have a good outing, you can see these things, pop through the roof. So that's kind of the two areas that I look for when I'm buying pitchers. Young guys who haven't broken out yet, guys who are very cheap, about to make their major league debut. Two entirely different schools of thoughts, but they both really work. Now we'll get into the honorable mentions. Now the thing with pitchers is that they're kind of slept on in the hobby. So, my honorable mentions for hitters under $10, they were some deep, deep sleepers. This list of names, though, for the pitchers, I love a lot of these guys. You got Landon Harmon of the Nationals, who just came back from injury. Cade Obermueller, who just got promoted. He's looked great. Jose Urbina of the Rays has looked great. Marcus Phillips of the Red Sox. Bryce Cunningham of the Yankees. Daniel Egan of the Diamondbacks, very sneaky name. David Davalillo of the Rangers. Matthew Fisher of the Phillies. J.D. Thompson of the Brewers. Mavis Graves of the Phillies, another guy who just got promoted. Jackson Humphreys of the Guardians. And Matt Tugboat Wilkinson of the Giants. Those are all good sleeper names to look at for under $10. Then we're going to hop right into our top 10 here, starting with Nate Snead of the Los Angeles Angels. He is my 99th ranked hobby pitcher. $7.39 is the average base autograph. Now, there were a lot of names in that honorable mentions category that were close to taking this 10th spot. As I said, I love these sleeper pitchers, but I'm going to go with the third round pick from last year's draft, Nate Snead of the Angels. The name of the game here is velocity. Snead was a reliever all 3 years in college, 1 at Wichita State and then 2 at Tennessee after he transferred. But the Angels selected him with every intention of trying him out as a starter. And with now 17 starts under his belt as a professional, I would say that experiment has shown some promise early on. While it's not uncommon for college relievers turned starters to spend a good amount of time down in single A, Snead was assigned to high A right out of the gate, where in his first 7 professional starts, he had a 2.80 ERA, 2.42 FIP, 9.93 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 1.53 walk per 9. When you hear reliever, your mind naturally goes to control issues, but Snead's 4.4% walk rate over his first 35 and a third innings in high A was extremely encouraging. Since then, he's been promoted to double A, and he struggled to find the same success, seeing his opponent's contact rates go up by about 8% compared to where they were at the previous level. It's kind of a bit of an odd profile. Usually the reliever turned starter mold I'm looking for is like a Michael Lombardi of the Royals, where they have wipeout stuff, but they kind of struggle to throw strikes. Snead has been the opposite, not walking a ton of guys, but also not striking out a ton. He touched 100 miles per hour with his fastball in college, and that's part of what gives me hope for his cards. Being able to do that just puts you in another category of exciting for the Bowman people. Even though he throws gas, the pitch shapes aren't great, so when he leaves it in the zone against better AA hitters, they're putting the bat on it. Fastball curveball is the combo that worked best for him in college. He's added a slider, he's messed with a cutter, changeup into the mix. Those all kind of need some refinement. But this is a play on ability alone. It's kind of a tough ask to expect a guy who spent his last 3 years as a reliever to go out and give you 6 innings against AA hitters in the first few months as a professional. But Nate Snead's doing it. And, the hobby loves high octane fastballs, and he has one. So if he can kind of improve the life on it, get more comfortable with his secondary pitches as he continues to progress, I think that he could be a nice high upside sleeper for the Angels. Number 9, I'm going to go with Malachi Witherspoon of the Detroit Tigers. He is my 94th ranked hobby pitcher and has an average base autograph around $6.70. Now, is it silly of me to have faith in Malachi Witherspoon because he should be a genetic equal to his twin brother and first-round pick Kyson Witherspoon of the Red Sox? Maybe it is, but I've kind of touched on this in the past, but coming out of high school, Malachi was actually the more highly regarded prospect. Then after they went to junior college, Kyson kind of passed him. He became the better college pitcher. He became the better draft prospect. I still think there's quite a bit to like here with Malachi, though. The stuff looked really good in college, mainly a 3-pitch mix, fastball, curveball, slider, which all graded out as above average offerings. His issue at Oklahoma wasn't so much control as it was command. He didn't have a ton of problems finding the zone, but he wasn't pitching to the parts of it that he wanted. And despite having really good stuff, he'd fall behind in counts. He misses spots. He'd then put stuff in the middle. He would get hit. But for how little time he spent in the Tigers organization, things have already looked much better, in my opinion. In 62 2/3 innings at single A, his opponents have a 68.9% contact rate against him, and he struck out 26.4% of the batters he's faced. Both of those are pretty solid. His walk rate is a big green flag for me as well. After walking 9.9% and 9.1% of the batters he faced both years at Oklahoma, that number is down to 7.9% in A-ball. With a strong 10.63 strikeouts per 9 innings and a 3.16 walks per 9, you're probably wondering why you haven't heard much about him this year, and that's because he has a 5.89 ERA. I will say, however, he's been wildly unlucky, and his xFIP is 3.74, as you can see, which I think paints a better picture of how he's looked. Not only is it bad BABIP luck, but those juiced balls are flying in the Florida League, and 25% of the total fly balls against him this year have been homers, which feels kind of crazy. Him not getting much hobby attention has to do with the stat line not being overly impressive, but under the hood, I think it's better than the surface stats show. We also know how quick the card market is to overreact when there's bloodline involved, and I can already see MLB leaning into the whole twin brothers shtick as him and Kyson both progress throughout the minors. Detroit has been sneakily good at pitcher development lately, and I think that they have a good amount of talent to work with here with Malachi Witherspoon. Number 8 on the list, I'm going to go with Joe Whitman of the San Francisco Giants. He's my 93rd ranked pitcher with an average base autograph of $6.48. We finally have a crafty lefty alert. Although the Bowman people notoriously disagree, I love a crafty left-handed pitcher that just knows how to pitch. Enter Joe Whitman, the Giants' second-round pick out of Kent State back in 2023. His profile is kind of what you'd expect from a crafty lefty. Solid fastball, but not a ton of velocity. Great slider, great command. Last year, Whitman spent the whole season at AA, where he started 26 games with a 5.29 ERA over 117 1/3 innings. Not stellar, but the adjusted numbers say he pitched better than that with an almost identical 3.61 FIP and 3.60 xFIP, with a 9.51 strikeouts per 9 innings and a 3.61 walk per 9, neither of which really blow you away. He was kind of what we assumed he was, an effective but not that exciting left-handed pitching prospect. This year, however, he was sent back to the same level, and man, did things look different. In 10 AA starts, Whitman had a 3.22 ERA, a 2.36 FIP, and a 3.06 xFIP, which were all big improvements, but it doesn't stop there. To get attention in Bowman, you have to miss bats, and that's almost a non-negotiable. But here's how some of those numbers changed in AA from last year to this year. Swinging strike percentage from 10.7% to 13.8%. Contact rate against 76.5% to 71.7%. Strikeouts per 9, 9.51 to 11.62. Strikeout percentage, 24.2% in 2025 to 33.2% in AA this year. Now I'm listening. On top of this, he also dropped his walk rate from 9.2 to 6.6 at that level. Basically every improvement you could hope for a pitcher to make. Unfortunately, the downside here is that he was almost too good, and the Giants promoted him to AAA, where he's now in the extremely hitter-friendly and where pitchers go to die Pacific Coast League. The improvements to his command have held, but he's allowing more contact, and his home run to fly ball rate shot up more than 13% since the promotion, so needless to say, he's giving up more runs. This might not be a maximum ceiling play, but for a player who's getting closer to being in the bigs, it's not a bad high floor play. Most guys with $6 autographs might not even make it to the league, but Joe Whitman will, and the data shows that the players with cheaper autographs are way more likely to not only see a call-up boost in their prices, but also more likely to continue to go up after they debut, as I said. So, not all plays are sexy. Some just present what is too good of value to pass up on, and I think that that's where Joe Whitman falls for me. Number 7 on the list, I'm going to go with Luis Perales of the Washington Nationals, who's my 85th ranked pitcher, has an average base autograph around $8.68. I love the idea of following Joe Whitman with Luis Perales, two players who couldn't be more different. They do have one thing in common, though, and that's that they both should be pretty close to their MLB debuts. Where Whitman is a lefty with great command and an okay fastball, Perales is a righty with one of the most electric fastballs in the minor leagues. The pitch characteristics on it are unreal. He hits 100 miles an hour regularly, 18 inches plus of induced vertical break. I used this stat before from Pipeline, but in the Arizona Fall League last year, there were a total of 43 pitches thrown in the triple digits, and 20 of those 43 came out of the hand of Luis Perales after not pitching for basically the entire regular season as he recovered from Tommy John surgery. Some evaluators have given higher grades to his cutter, though, which sits in the 90s with horizontal break. He also throws a splitter, which has good movement, but he struggles to throw it where he wants. The obvious downside here is that Perales has extreme reliever risk. His best pitches are by far his fastball and cutter. His command isn't great, and there's a ton of effort in his delivery. Then again, when you're only 6 feet tall, it can't be easy to throw this kind of heat, and the durability is also a concern. Even though a lot of people have bailed on Perales after he hasn't looked quite the same since that Tommy John, it's hard for me to quit because he was so incredibly dominant prior to that, and even after it, the fastball is just as electric. I wouldn't have been surprised at all if the Nationals moved him to the bullpen at the start of this year to get him ready for his inevitable role as a reliever in the MLB, but they didn't. And in fact, his workload has increased throughout the season as he started at around 45 pitches per start in April, then got up to 75, 85 over the last couple of months before throwing a season-high 95 pitches in his last start. He's taken the mound 4 times in July, and in those 19 2/3 innings, he has a 1.83 ERA, and opponents are hitting just 171 against him. And one more thing, he's already on the 40-man roster, which means the Nationals could call him up at any moment. The risk here is that if they call him up and he debuts in relief, it will be hard to move the needle a ton on his card prices, but based on how they've been utilizing him recently, increasing his workload, it feels like they're going to let him rip as a starter, and if he comes up to start a game and is firing 100+ mile-per-hour fastballs, he could get some buzz and some internet hype really quickly, which is exactly the kind of thing we're looking for. It's an extremely risky play, but I think it's also a really fun one for under $10. Number 6 on the list is going to be Aaron Watson of the Cincinnati Reds. He's my 90th ranked pitcher, has an average base autograph around $6.60 as of me writing this article. There were a handful of prep arms in last year's class that I really liked as sleepers in 2025 Bowman draft, including Aaron Watson, who nearly cracked my top 12 pitcher rankings for that product. Here's what I found when I did my deep dive for that card release. Watson is a 6'5" right-hander. That's a checked box. Cincinnati went over slot to sign him at $2.75 million. Another checked box. Some evaluators who scouted him put a 60 grade on his command. Another checked box. A lot of things going right for him early on. This is where it got interesting for me. His most utilized pitches were fastball, slider, and curve, and although they were all extremely effective for him, none of them really graded out as much more than average. The reason he was so dominant was because of that plus command. His pitch ability for a player his age is phenomenal. He mixes well, and though the velocity and spin rates might not blow you away right now, he's able to land all 3 of those pitches wherever he wants them, and this kind of drew me to Watson. We very often see 6'5" pitchers who throw gas, but they have no idea where it's going. But to have that frame as a teenager, not have it fully filled out yet, and already have plus command is not something you see every day, and to be honest, it just fascinates me. Ryan Sloan once told me that if a guy can throw strikes, but he has just okay stuff, then what do you think he's working on? Getting better stuff. Watson might be a higher floor prep pitcher since it's command over stuff right now, but with his frame and fact that he's still 19, is it crazy to think that the Reds unlock some more ceiling as he adds muscle and improves his extension? extension, all that stuff as he develops. I don't think it is. He's missed some times during his professional debut, but he's back now, and so far through 27 and 2/3 innings in the complex league, he has a 3.58 ERA, 11.71 strikeouts per nine, and a 2.28 walks per 9 innings, and that's not counting the 5-inning, 9-strikeout performance the other day in the ACL World Series, which the Reds won. Now, it's rookie ball hitter, so it's hard to get too excited until we see him move up to single A, but for a guy whose weakness was thought to be his stuff, a 29% strikeout rate is an encouraging start to a professional debut. The 5.6% walk rate is less surprising since he was praised for his control, and because of that, I feel like he has a safer floor than most high school pitchers. Prep arms are always a big-time gamble, but I think the bones are here for a really, really nice pitching prospect in the future. Speaking of preps in the 2025 draft class, number 5 on the list is Dean Livingston, who is now my 74th ranked pitching prospect and has an average base autograph at $9.65. Like Watson, Livingston also wound up in the next best section of my Bowman draft rankings that also included, as I said, Aaron Watson, Johnny Slawinski of the Angels, Miguel Sime Jr. of the Nationals. So pretty nice start for that cluster of sleepers. If you go over to the site, I do weekly hot sheets. Livingston just made his 5th consecutive appearance on yesterday's pitcher's hot sheet, so there's only so much more I can say about him that I haven't said there already. He was a late bloomer in high school who wasn't added to his team starting rotation until his senior year because he was just too busy mashing as a position player. In his 2025 spring season, Livingston hit .434 with 10 home runs and an .880 slugging percentage. Where his draft stock became interesting, though, is when the 6'4" right-hander stepped on the mound and started pumping 96 miles an hour. In that same year where he showed that crazy power on offense, he also went 7-2 with a 1.27 ERA as a pitcher. He had 89 strikeouts and 44 innings. Yes, that's 2 strikeouts per inning. And on top of that, his strikeout to walk ratio was over 5.5. So he's very athletic, great frame, steps on the mound, and not only throws gas, but he has good command. Twist my arm, but I'm in. I'm always in on these, two-way players finally committing to one side for the first time in their life. The issue for me with ranking him too high in 2025 Bowman draft was that although the ceiling seemed really good, the floor scared me a bit since he had such a short track record as a pitcher. He was inconsistent with his secondary pitches, didn't have a ton of spin, and was mainly successful because he threw so hard, which is fine, but I thought it might be a slow burn as a professional. In his debut season, however, he currently holds a 2.65 ERA in his first 12 appearances between the complex league and single A. I would have expected a player like him to see some extended time in the complex, but after throwing just 3 times to the tune of a 1.29 ERA, 10.93 strikeouts per 9, and a 2.57 walk per 9, the Diamondbacks quickly promoted him. Now, he hasn't had quite as much success in single A, especially in the swing and miss department, but he's been very effective. With a 3.12 ERA in 9 starts, I would have bought him as a long-term hold before he even started this season on athletic ability and potential alone, especially since the scouts who watched him in high school said that as he filled out and learned how to pitch, he'd likely throw 100+ miles per hour. What I didn't expect was that he'd have this much success this early on. It's a gamble, no doubt, because there's still a lot of development needed, but this might be one of the best pitcher ceilings that you'll find under $10 in a teenage arm. On to number 4 on the list, that's going to be JT Quinn of the Baltimore Orioles. He's my 69th ranked pitching prospect, current base autograph around $8.67. Now, everyone, including myself, is always talking about how no pitcher from the 2025 class has been more of a surprise this year than Joseph Jurwa, which is true, but I feel like the Orioles may have found another one here that's not getting enough love. JT Quinn is a big 6'6" right-hander who functioned as both a starter and reliever last year at Georgia. Prior to transferring there, he spent 2 years at Ole Miss, one as a starter, one as a reliever, but he didn't have a ton of success there due to some struggles with command. After posting rates of 5.86 and 6.98 walks per 9 innings before the transfer, that number dropped to 4.25 at Georgia, with an even bigger drop in his ERA from 8.84 his last year at Mississippi to 2.75 in the spring of 2025 at UGA. It seemed unclear if he could be developed as a starter or if he'd end up as a reliever, but when Baltimore selected him at the end of the 2nd round last year, it became very clear that they thought he could start. Quinn has the potential for 3+ pitches including a mid to upper 90s fastball, which touches 98, and he has an absolutely wipeout slider. Those two pitches are no question. Third is a curveball that had great movement and depth, but he was much less accurate with it in college. Being a fastball slider pitcher with shaky command feels like a slam dunk reliever, and maybe he ends up as one, which does give me pause, but you do have to be encouraged by the professional debut, mostly for the control he's shown. After posting walk rates over 13.5% in both seasons at Ole Miss, that number went down to 11.6% at Georgia, and this year in high A, it's 7.9%. He's commanding his pitches better, he's landing that curveball for strikes more often, and now it's starting to look like maybe he could be a starter. Of course, the issue is that he had kind of a rough July and got roughed up a couple of times, and that caused his base autograph price to fall under $10, which is the only reason he's eligible for this list. But he has an 8.35 ERA in July, which is tough to look at, but it was 2.70 in April, 3.77 in May, and 2.73 in June. After having a 5-walk start and a couple others with 3 free passes earlier this year, Quinn has now walked 2 or fewer batters in 9 consecutive starts. The Orioles have been doing well with pitcher development as of late, and I think Quinn has more raw ability than most of the arms that they've had success with, so I think this is a great pitcher to take a chance on at this price. On to number 3 is going to be Gage Stanifer of the Toronto Blue Jays. He's my 67th ranked hobby pitcher, average base autograph, $8.43. Another team who seems to have completely turned around their pitching development is the Blue Jays, and Gage Stanifer looks to be a prime example of that. After being a late-round pick out of high school back in 2022, Stanifer did nothing of note in his 2023 debut or the following season in 2024. That changed last year when he threw 110 innings with a 2.86 ERA, 2.70 FIP, 13.17 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 4.75 walk per 9, while earning 2 promotions and pitching at 3 different levels in Single A, High A, and Double A. That is a hell of a season for a player that you don't hear much about in most prospect circles. Of course, it always comes with a higher than you want walk rate, but every time I see a K per 9 over 13, I'm almost immediately interested, no questions asked. Missing bats is the fastest path to hobby relevance as a pitcher. His fastball velocity jumped up to the mid-90s with incredible characteristics, including a ton of arm side run, good release point, and an IVB that gets up to 20 inches. The slider is even more devastating, and it is a piece of trivia that I cannot forget after hearing it last year. Gage Stanifer threw 26 innings in Single A last year. He faced 103 batters, and he allowed 0 hits against his slider. Just unreal. This year, it's been a tougher go in Double A, and as of today, his ERA sits at a still respectable 4.52, but I can't not mention that his home run to fly ball ratio, which was 5.5% last year, is 18.5% this year. His ground ball rates are almost identical, and so are his contact rates against at an impressive 67.7%, but when he allows fly balls, they seem to go out of the park, maybe more than they should, not making an excuse for him. But, the juice ball evidence grows by the day. He will need to get the command in check because, as MLB Pipeline has said about him before, if he throws strikes, he'll be an MLB pitcher. There's no question about the stuff. It is diabolical. That fastball-slider combination induces such good whiff rates that the path to him becoming a more sought-after name in Bowman is not that tough a one. All the subscribers on the site like to joke about my tendency to love pitchers with great stuff who struggle with command, but let's be real, those guys have a much better chance of jumping exponentially in price than the ones who locate well but don't strike anybody out. That's just how it works. And that's why I'm always down to take a chance on the Gage Stanifers of the prospect world. Number 2, we're going to go with an interesting name here. I'm going to go with Patrick Forbes of the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's my 60th ranked pitcher. He has an average base autograph at around $8.95. While a few of the names on this list were in my sleeper categories for 2025 Bowman draft, as I mentioned, only one of them actually made my top 12, and that was Patrick Forbes. As I said earlier, I have a real soft spot for multi-sport athletes and former two-way players because, again, there's just so much untapped potential when you start training solely on one thing for the first time in your life. Forbes is one of my favorite examples in last year's draft. When he was in high school, he was considered by many to be the best prep hitter in the state of Kentucky. He's a corner infielder with plus power, committed to Louisville. His freshman year there, he was used almost exclusively as a hitter, though he did throw a couple of, relief innings, but nothing serious. Then in 2024, on the very first at-bat of the season, he broke his left hand when he was hit by a pitch, which is absolutely brutal. That didn't stop him, however, from returning a month later as a pitcher, where he had a 3.72 ERA, 9.93 strikeouts per nine, and a 4.66 walk per nine in 29 innings. It was after that season that he decided to make the switch to full-time pitcher. And after one offseason of focusing solely on pitching, he returned to the mound with a 4.42 ERA, 3.70 FIP, 14.76 strikeouts per 9 innings, and a 4.29 walk per 9. That's 14.76 strikeouts per 9 innings. He had a 36.7% strikeout rate at Louisville his last year. Just crazy. He was touching 100 with his fastball. He throws a power slider. Both of those have graded as plus pitches already. This led to Arizona taking him at the end of the first round and giving him $3 million to sign. Obviously, to be a starter, he needs to develop a good third pitch and improve his control. But again, since he was so new to this and already had such impressive stuff, he was a risk I was willing to take. Then he was unfortunately put on the shelf this spring with an arm injury and wasn't able to make his high A debut until early June. And there he threw 14 and 2/3 innings over 5 appearances, but in those 5 appearances, 2.45 ERA, 12.27 strikeouts per 9. And remember, I said you need to improve the command. How about a 1.23 walks per 9 innings, 68% contact rate. Opponents hit 163 against him, and he struck out 37% of the hitters he faced. Just incredible. But his stuff was always going to be good. How about the 3.7% walk rate? He walked only 2 of the 54 batters he faced. Just such an outrageous month of baseball. Now I have to get to the heartbreaking part. He's not on the IL yet, but he hasn't pitched since the end of June due to elbow discomfort, which feels a lot like maybe he's going to need surgery. Without any further knowledge of what's going on, it's tough to buy his cards, but since he's so cheap, I'm having a hard time not doing so and stashing them away. This is one of the most electric pitchers I've watched in the minors this year, so I had to put him up in the top 3, and I'll just cross my fingers that we'll get to see him do it again very soon. And last but certainly not least, my 36th ranked hobby pitcher, and that's Ethan Pecco of the Houston Astros, whose base autograph's around $8.87. I mean, who else could it be? There hasn't been a pitcher that I've been higher on than the consensus for the last year than Ethan Pecco. This one is just a numbers game. As I said with Joe Whitman, there's data to back up that prospects with cheaper autographs see a bigger spike when they're called up, and they're more likely to continue to go up after they debut. Where everyone rushes to sell players once it is announced they're being called up, which is almost always the right move in certain instances. As I said, there's always 2 groups that I'll consider holding, and that's players under $15 to $20 and pitchers. So when you get a guy who is both, it's kind of fun to roll the dice on them since you're not into it for a big number. Let's say his base autograph's $10, you're buying golds for $100. That could easily double on the call-up news, giving you another potential exit opportunity in the green if you don't want to gamble on how well he throws in his debut. Basically what I'm saying is that a cheap pitcher close to debuting is one of the most fun waves to ride, and Pecco is my favorite one of those right now. In the 2 seasons prior to 2026, few pitchers threw as consistently well as Pecco while still getting almost no recognition in the prospect world. In 2024, he pitched at 3 levels, starting in A, going to high A and double A, where he had a 3.47 ERA and an 11.72 strikeouts per 9. Last year, he started in double A, then moved to triple A, and between 2 levels had a 3.83 ERA, 3.29 FIP, and 10.69 strikeouts per 9 innings, while only walking 3 batters per 9. Then he had a scare this spring with thoracic outlet syndrome, which can be brutal, but luckily he avoided surgery and was able to return after a short rehab stint. This year has just been okay for Pecco in AAA, throwing in the Pacific Coast League, which is a horrendous place to be for a pitcher, as I mentioned. He has a 4.82 ERA, 4.43 FIP, 8.13 strikeouts per 9 innings, and just a 2.89 walks per 9. He's allowing more contact, but he has been better with location. He's inducing way more ground balls. The ground ball rate's up 14% from last year. He's just not getting the same amount of whiffs. He mixes about 5 different pitches, but outside of the fastball, none of them are really grading as spectacular. The heater is tough, though. He runs up to 97, really good vertical approach angle. Of course, that ERA this year isn't encouraging, but when he's on, he's been on. He had back-to-back 6 earned run starts in May before allowing only 2 earned runs total in his next 4 starts across 24 innings, which was a 0.75 ERA over 30 days. It's been kind of an up and down year. I wish more than anything I could say that he was missing more bats this season, since that's the one thing that we really want to see in Bowman. I will say, though, his last start was a very encouraging sign. He struck out 7 while walking 0 against a really good AAA Brewers lineup. But the fact of the matter is that Houston has a negative 4.2 WAR from their starting pitching this year, which is 29th out of 30 MLB teams. They just traded McCullers. Mike Burrows went to the IL. All of these things point towards Ethan Pecco knocking on the doorstep of his MLB debut. He has been my favorite pitching prospect under $10 for what feels like over a year now. There is no reason to stop now. I think we'll see this thing get to $20 on news that he's called up, and then it's up to you if you want to roll the dice on his debut. But as I said, riding that wave, crossing your fingers and hoping that debut is enough to make those cards go up 4 or 5x is why we're doing this. It's the most fun part about holding pitchers into their call-up. Ethan Pecco, one of the ones that I'm rooting hardest for. That is going to do it for the top 10 Bowman pitchers under $10. Again, make sure you go over to www.prospect-analytics.com. I give you all this kind of stuff and more so that, you can kind of get an advantage of the Bowman game. Find these sleepers before everybody else is really talking about them. We've seen some huge jumps from some really good players this year that nobody was on prior to 2026, trying to beat that hype. There's a lot of good information over on the site. And again, if you will be at the National, please feel free to comment, DM me on Twitter. Let me know. I'd love to meet up and talk prospects, do some trades in Bowman and all that good stuff. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.